I'd love to start how you two met, if you're okay with that too. Because I'm like fascinated that you're like a collector of us. And I'm like, Ravyn, how did you start collecting us? I feel like we're little spiritual Pokemon.
Oh my gosh, you guys are amazing.
I'd love to know how you and Michael first met.
Yes, okay. I first learned about you, and maybe you don't even know this, from a friend of mine who I have known since I was a teenager, who just so happened to live in Castle Rock. And she was encouraging me to come to a drum circle. I'm in Colorado Springs, and the events were Denver, Boulder, which was tough. All of that to say, I signed up for your newsletter, and I saw that you were hosting IIHA Beery, and I signed up for a session. I received the text message that led me on this beautiful path up to a yurt where you were hosting, and I had the pleasure of experiencing La Limpia and Life Purpose reading with IIHA, and Michael was there as well. And at this point, he was already in his own right, practicing.
Yeah, when was this? What year is this?
This was just last year.
This was last year.
September.
Yeah, just a year ago.
It was a beautiful thing to witness how Michael supported IIHA in his own right, but also it was evident that he had his own skill set too. And so I continued to follow him after that, and when I started the effort of the Conscious Colorado Collective, I was at an expo event, and I pointed at poor Michael, and I was like, you.
Were you, so was that Body, Mind, Spirit, and you had a booth, and then obviously you were there for CCC?
I was there in Brighton. It was the first time that Body, Mind, Spirit was hosting in Brighton, and where Michael, I think, would typically have had a booth. At this specific event, he was coming to just commingle and see what was happening.
It's even more serendipitous.
It was so awesome. And he gave me the pleasure of his time, and we connected further, and that's when I learned more about his backstory and about how he came into his own healing path, which I'm so excited for everybody to hear about, because it was captivating, even in the moment, but it was also grounding.
You just knew.
I just knew. And also, as you say, that we're all like collecting each other like spiritual Pokemon. When I think about leadership and spirituality, I see us all in a circle with our arms linked, right? In order to bring the collective up. And I was hopeful that Michael and I would connect further after the expo event, and he said he'd think about it, and we did. And since then, it has been a consistent, just beautiful evolution of collaboration, and also my own spiritual growth.
I love
I
that.
can attribute. Yeah.
That's
So
really
thank you.
special.
Yeah.
So this was last year. At that point, how long had you been offering your services to the world?
Well, let's see. I mean, I really started doing it as a real thing in 2014.
Yeah.
I started really doing my work.
For yourself or for the community?
No, for the community. I mean, I've been doing my work and other types of my work, you know, for quite a few years prior.
Were you on the spiritual bandwagon of you found your way slowly, or were you pushed into the deep end?
Both.
Oh, okay. I have a theory it has to be one or the other, so this is good. I'm collecting details as I go.
Yeah, it was both. And I grew up experiencing, you know, some health issues, chronic health issues when I was young, which led me into some, I guess you could say, alternative ways of addressing some of that when I was younger. And then as I got into my teenage years and coming to college, started getting more into the alternative scene. I went to art school.
That'll do it.
Yes, it was a big wake-up call, because I grew up in small-town western Colorado, and all of a sudden I was living in Capitol Hill, Denver, middle of the alternative art scene, which is like, I never knew anything existed like that. But continued to struggle with health issues. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was in my early 20s.
Crohn's is really tough.
And that pretty quickly led me into alternative ways of looking at health and healing, because the Western system was just so inadequate,
Right.
you know, with that, and limiting even. So in that sense, I had learned many, many things about how to heal and alternative ways of looking at health through Chinese medicine and body work and energy healing and meditation and yoga and
Everything.
all martial arts and
Yeah.
all kinds of things for many years. It was, in my mind, was about so I could heal myself, but it was also the backstory of what led me to becoming a healer.
Of course.
Early 2000s life started getting difficult. And the way that I look at it now, it was really the beginning of my initiation into becoming a healer.
Interesting that you went through, because something we talked about in Life Purpose is the challenges
Yeah.
that show up in the palm. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that you noted a few challenges and then environment changes and all these things, but you still didn't feel like that was part of the initiation.
Right. Right. And I mean, there's many levels to it, right? Of how we can embody this life purpose, so to speak. But yeah, in my experience, I had been learning all of these healing modalities, and then in the early 2000s, life got tough.
Yeah.
And with the stress involved with that and the stock market crash that happened in 2008, and I'd been in self-employed for a lot of years and was in the publishing industry, which just was a nightmare to be in because there was no stability. And all of that just added up.
Yeah.
And health condition got worse. I lived homeless for some time and eventually ended up in the hospital. And I avoided that as long as possible because I didn't want to go back into that Western medical system. But I also surrendered my life. I made a very conscious decision and had a talk with Spirit. You know, I just said, I'm not going to try to save myself because I spent all my money, spent all my time and energy on trying to do that through these alternative methods that just weren't working.
That was one of my questions, which is, as you're seeking things out and there's different modalities, did you feel like there was one that helped along the way, or did it feel like closing doors?
At times, yes, there were. There was acupuncture that was helping. There was a course diet and lifestyle. But with the challenges I was experiencing during that time, there was just nothing that could compensate for that to regain my health. And I had an innate sense that what I needed to know was I needed a sense of purpose in that, because without that, it's like I had nothing to rally for, you know? But that led me just in this slow decline and homelessness and very, very poor health. And then eventually one of my brothers came from here in Colorado and he took me in.
Was there a hesitation with that, of somebody coming and offering that stability in that moment?
There was, in a sense, because I knew that it would lead me back to Western medicine.
Yeah.
And I knew the medications and I knew the machines and everything that they were going to do. And I really didn't want a part of that. But I also surrendered. And I said, I'm not going to do anything. And it wasn't me. I mean, it was my brother, you know, and my family. And I thought, well, I'm just here to see what happens. And I remember, and this was in Montana, I was living down the Bitterroot Valley, and we were driving north toward Missoula to the hospital.
Oh, is that where your brother was living at the time?
No, I was living at the time in
Got
Montana. They were here in Colorado.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, since they came there, my brother came there, and we were driving north up to Missoula, and I was just reflecting on the whole thing. And soon as we got into the outskirts of Missoula, I could see the hospital on the hill in the center of town, and it's very iconic. And I was just looking at the building and I'm thinking, well, if I have to go here, then I want to be in that room right there at the top with the glass windows on two sides facing west so I can just see the beauty of this place,
Everything.
the Bitterroot Valley. And they checked me in And after a few hours of all of that, it was laborious, they put me in that room. And I thought, isn't that interesting? It's like, okay, well, maybe this is going somewhere. And then one thing leads to another, leads to another. And after a couple of weeks of being there, I basically went into a coma. I was unconscious. I developed a fungal infection in my blood that went through the blood-brain barrier, I guess, into the brain, and it was really severe. And they thought I wasn't going to make it.
Was this just complications from Crohn's or other issues?
My body was so broken down and
Yeah.
so weak that I really had no immune system left. And then the theory is that fungal infection developed from the IV that they had in my arm, because they leave that for like days at a time.
Of course.
And it developed there and went in the blood. But in any case, that's what happened. And it wasn't until, I don't know how long exactly I was in that state, but I was in a very lucid state. And I was aware of what was happening, even though I don't know if they said I was in a coma, I don't quite know. But that's what it was. And they were talking about me as if I wasn't there. And my family had come from Colorado, and they were just saying their goodbyes.
And you're aware of all these
I was
goodbyes?
very aware of it. I was very aware of everything that was happening. But I was more aware of my relationship with spirit in that time, and like the next world, so to speak. And there was a specific moment in time where it became very clear that I was transitioning through this life into the next. And I paused and I said to Spirit, I said, well, if there's a purpose, then let me know now, because this is it. Nature is just taking me. And then I was shown the vision. And I could go into all the details of all of that, but we'd spend a lot of time talking about it because it was very rich. But
understandably, especially being between worlds.
Yes, and it was a download of my life purpose, which was simultaneously a huge breath of fresh air and life, just like energy that just came into my body, and there was new life there. And I think I realized more of the critical state of my body and all of that, and I just thought, how do I heal? Like, they can't even keep me alive on these machines. So how am I supposed to do this?
Come back.
And I was shown another vision. And this one was really a big download. And it showed me, it was like a high-speed video download of 3 years of detailed information of what I needed to do. At which point, at the end of this 3 years, that I would begin meeting the shamans that would teach me to heal and show me my power. And so that's what I did. I followed that vision. And it was not easy. I mean, it was 3 years of incredible hardship.
Of course.
And it was a real test. And the way that I look back now, it was really an initiation process of testing my faith to follow that vision and to, I don't know if it's accurate or not to say that spirit was testing me, but in any case, I was tested to see if I could do that, you know. And I did. I started meeting the shamans. And then that quickly, it just blew up at the time that I started meeting them. I remember the first one that I met, and I had talked with Naropa Institute about being a student there. And I didn't really know the pathway where I was going to meet the shamans. I just knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I had connected with a Buddhist psychologist. I had met with many psychologists throughout this time, which was something that I needed to do. But I just couldn't stand being around most of them. But I found a guy who had gone to Naropa, and he had a very different approach. There was no diagnosis. There was no pharmaceuticals, not even discussed, none of it. It was very simple, and he really impacted me. And so I talked to Naropa, and I thought, well, maybe I should follow up on that. And they offered me a full ride scholarship.
Wow.
And it was about the same time that I met this woman, Walking Thunder. She's lives in the Navajo Nation down in New Mexico, and she had come to southern Colorado to a friend's place to do a sweat lodge and some healings. And I went and I spent time with her, and she changed everything for me. Mm-hmm. Like really, with the very simple, practical way that only these shamans could do, she changed the trajectory of my life.
I think I'm so excited to talk about some of the teachers that have come in at these moments as like the 3 years are unfolding.
Yeah.
But one question that is really stuck on my heart right now is around that conversation with spirit. Mm-hmm. Because in this room, I think at least for me, I won't speak for Ravyn, it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
But before that moment, had you felt connected to spirit? Did you have those conversations? Was there any kind of like moment before that you felt that presence, or was that really the first time?
It's an interesting question because I think I only partly identified with it. But when I look back on all the journaling that I did and all of the art that I had done and the things that I did, I saw nothing but spiritual connection.
Was that during the time in Denver when you were going to school?
It was all of my life. Mm-hmm. I can look back on times where just in so many ways I was guided in my life. But I never really saw myself as that. I was very interested in all of these very esoteric spiritual practices and stuff, but I never really saw myself as that.
Was there any spiritual or religious upbringing for your family? Any connection? Or is
it was very conservative Christian upbringing. Yeah, which was a part of the problem.
Yeah. I was going to say, did that impact your relationship to this idea of God or spirit or higher power?
Not really, because at a pretty early age, and my mom was fairly open, I think, even though she was very conservative, she was really very spiritual at heart. And she actually at an early age got me involved with more sort of new age kind of stuff, but it was short-lived in her life. I think she had some experiences that kind of frightened her, and fear of the religion pulled her back into that world. You know, but I remember I was always the odd one in the family, you know, yeah. The black sheep who was into the new thing, whether I was into yoga before anybody knew it was yoga.
I was going to say, now we're like, what do you mean the weird thing is yoga?
That was back in the early 90s or something. And Tai Chi and Qigong and the different things that I was doing that at the time were just very obscure.
I bet especially growing up in a more small area in Western Colorado,
yeah,
you have that small nature, like small town nature.
Yes.
On top of also doing things that I think a lot of people weren't talking about at that time.
Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting question because when I look back on that time too, while it was very conservative and there was a lot of challenges, and you could even say trauma, just growing up in the way that I did was traumatic, with an alcoholic father who was very emotionally, verbally abusive and suppressive, and there was a lot of fear in that environment. So on one hand, it was the problem, but also I grew up with a lot of freedom and in a beautiful area where we were just out. We didn't live in town. We lived out in the hills and the sagebrush and the juniper trees. And one of our big family pastimes was going into the land and looking for Indian artifacts. You know, so I was developing this relationship and this reverence for the indigenous traditions and the people that had lived there before us in these simple ways that, you know, who knew at the time, but I think were in some ways forming an early relationship with this calling into indigenous shamanism.
I like to call it the invisible string.
Yeah.
Where then you look back and you're like, well, clearly it all made sense. And it's
exactly.
like when I was 6 and I was just enjoying where I lived, you're not thinking, and in 20, 30 years,
yeah,
this is going to happen.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. That's beautiful. I'm glad that you shared. Thank you. I know that it was the teachers who brought you onto your healing path in terms of cultivating these gifts that you have. Would you like to share a bit about your teachers now?
Sure. I think in that beginning several years of that path, I was really learning a lot. And
how many years after the hospital was this happening when you started going on that 3-year journey? When did you start finding them after that?
It was in early 2010. It was actually a very interesting time. It was near the winter solstice in 2012, just prior to the winter solstice in 2012, when I began meeting the shamans. That was when I met Walking Thunder. And if you remember, winter solstice of 2012 was the end of the Mayan calendar.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
One of my sons was born in 2012, December 9th, so I was very aware.
And that whole thing that was coming up at that time played a very significant role for me, because I recognized this calling and happening, and I saw the convergence of all of that, right? I mean, the near-death experience, and at this precipice of the time when the Mayan calendar ended was when I was going to begin meeting the shamans, you know. And yeah, it was almost 3 years, just shy of 3 years, when I began meeting those shamans.
And Walking Thunder was the first one.
She was the first one that I met.
What an incredible name, too. So much power.
Walking Thunder, yeah. She's an amazing shaman, very traditional Dene healer, and just beautiful teachings. I worked with her for a while, and I did some like light initiation work with her, and a very powerful time. But then I was called into many different paths, and I worked with quite a few different shamans from around the world. A man named Ananak, who's a shaman from Greenland, and quite a few others. I worked with a local Navajo shaman for a number of years. He played an important part. Garrett Duncan is his name.
Wow. As you're working with all of these shamans and teachers and healers, how are you also rebuilding and supporting your life during this time?
Well, that was a challenge.
Yeah.
The work that I did with Walking Thunder really did ignite that path, I think. It was really formative, because we did a beautiful healing, and I had done some sweat lodge with her. And I had been lying down for this healing session where she did her traditional healing with me that was really beautiful and amazing. But then she told me to get up and stand up, and she grabbed me in a big bear hug from behind. And she told me I had to fight to get away. And so I did. And then she made me do it again.
Yeah.
And I got away, and she made me do it again. And she made me really fight. I had to work hard. And finally I got like really pissed off, and I fought, and she challenged me to do this.
What are you thinking as this person is bear hugging you from behind?
I didn't really know what was happening at the time,
Yeah.
but I got really pissed off, and I screamed and yelled. I cussed at her or something, and I got away. And then she looked me in the eyes with a big smile on her face, and she says, "Good." Says, "Now, if you want to heal, go do that with the rest of your life."
Oof.
"Now, get the hell out of here," she said. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. And it was take that attitude of being willing to fight for these things in my life that I want to have in my life,
Yeah.
to reclaim that. And so that was really formative. And for years, I mean, even to this day, that has its moments where it applies, right? Because it's not easy living in this world and that I live in. And I think for all of us, it's not easy. And we need to be able to draw upon that part of ourselves where we have to really ask, what the hell am I doing? Do I really want this? Or am I going to just give up?
Do you think that's really reflective of the moment you had with Spirit in the hospital when you were in that pause?
I think in that time that I was in the hospital, I felt very free. I had no attachment to either outcome. If anything, it was much easier to just let go of life. But recognizing the calling, I also knew that few years of challenge really helped me to clarify some things for myself about the nature of life and reality. And I knew that there was no freedom in death. In a sense, sure. But I'm going to be given the opportunity to dance with the same life again at another time. So why not now? That's what brought me back into it. But it's an interesting thing, right? Because sometimes we need to surrender.
Yeah.
And give up so that something larger can write a few of those pages for us or do some of that work that we in human form don't identify with as being possible. Mm-hmm. But really is a dance between those two worlds to really learn our power. And I think that's one of the things that we need to learn to discern is when do we give up? To sort of acknowledge the higher power. Or when do we claim it in life? Say again?
I always joke now that I've become a professional quitter.
Yeah.
Because I used to be the person that was like, I will sweat, I will bleed. If I promised, if I said it, I have to do it. Yeah. And then that was probably the funniest unintended consequence of me going on a spiritual journey. I'm a professional quitter.
Yeah.
If I know it's not right and I know it's not aligned, I do so respectfully and with grace. But I appreciate that acknowledgement of what surrender can look like, because to me, sometimes it's literally quitting.
Exactly. And I think that's what many of the clients that I work with now, it's exactly what they have to face, and including myself in different ways. We have these identifications with who we are in this life. Mm-hmm. And we have these identifications that we need to, especially culturally, we need to work hard in life. And we're taught that there needs to be this suffering in life, and if we're going to be successful. But what we find out is really, suffering leads to more suffering. And we have to learn when to quit all of that, when to stop all of that, and surrender long enough that something else can be born again. Mm. And I think that's a big challenge for a lot of people, because we are in many ways taught that survival is about going.
We've had this conversation, you and I.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah. One thing I would love to talk about too is you were saying that there was like sweat lodges and other what modalities did you experience with these shamans and healers as you were like first going all over the world and meeting them?
Yeah, some of the things that stand out, there's been a lot, but that one experience that I had with Walking Thunder is a story that I tell a lot, because it really captures the essence of how these shamans work, and I think one of the gifts that they carry. And I've experienced similar type of teaching from many of them. As I've journeyed, I've had a handful of these different shamans that have really impacted my life. And Walking Thunder was one of them, and Garrett Duncan was one of them. And John Lockley, he's a Sangoma from South Africa. I worked with him for a lot of years, and we're still very close. And the things that he taught me about the ancestral connection and the ancestral healing work were very important. It's not something that I talk a great deal about with, other than the importance of recognizing our own roots in life and who we are and where we've come from, which leads me to a very important discussion. I was mentioning in the beginning, before we started filming, I took a few moments to sit out here and just ground myself into this conversation. And I took a little bit of tobacco, and I was sitting where I could see Pikes Peak. Pikes Peak is a very sacred mountain to the indigenous people. Sun Mountain, they call it Tiwa. And I probably don't pronounce that exactly right, but the translation is Sun Mountain. and to the Ute people. And so it brought me back into that context of who I am and what I'm doing here in this time, in this place on Earth. And the importance that we have in thinking in this bigger way to realize our own roots and what our ancestry is and who our ancestors were. And equally importantly, who the ancestors of this land were and still are with the indigenous people from North America. And when we can see ourselves in this bigger context and in context of also of our purpose and what we're doing here, we have to integrate all of that. We can't deny who we are and what this land is and what it was to the indigenous people and who they are. If we're denying any of that, in the way I see it, we're shortcutting something. And we're shortcutting part of our own power and our ability to be in full integrity with what we do.
I agree. It's something I talk about a lot with other healers and folks just starting their spiritual journey, especially as someone who's white, is how do we honor that? How do we have the education walking in? And how do we also compensate the lineages and the healers and the shamans that are sharing these gifts and holding on to them and passing them on, despite the fact that so much of history has tried to erase it.
Yes.
And I'd love to know from your perspective too of how do people honor that? How do they find people that are bringing it from the right cultures and the right lineages to people, and how do we honor that as participants?
Yeah. I think it's a complex story or a complex question to answer in its entirety. And there's a lot of different, if you ask the indigenous people, you'll get a lot of different answers depending on who you talk to, because they all have their own challenges and relationships with that. But in the ways that I've come into my path, it's really just honoring who they are, honoring their teaching, honoring that they're the carriers of that wisdom and that their ancestors have been the carriers of that wisdom, and that I wouldn't simply be here doing what I'm doing if it weren't for them. And specifically speaking to the traditions and lineages that I've really become closely connected with, that's very easy and natural in a sense, because I just naturally want to give back to them.
Yeah.
I mention their names all the time, and I lead the trips to Ecuador, to where we can go and you can meet them in person. We have different sustainability programs that we work on to help enrich their communities and empower them to carry on the traditions in all of the changing landscape of the very complex challenges and issues that they're facing in the Amazon, in particular up in the highlands too. And there's a lot of ways that I try and do that through
That bridge.
Yes, being that bridge of the old way and the modern way. And I truly believe that that way of life, the way of relating to the earth and life and the universe, that those elders and those traditions have held, is the solution to the issues that we have.
Yeah.
And sadly, I think that I don't know that modern society is ever going to really honor that. I think that I even see it today, or the modern psychedelic movement. And we have these conversations. I'm involved with that and leading the trips there. And I'm involved in some of the conversations that we're having here locally in Colorado. And Colorado's one of the leaders in this movement, right? And we got the big psychedelic conference coming up. There's almost no indigenous involvement in that community.
It's devastating.
And there's a lot of talk about that with individuals, and a lot of them recognizing that, but where is the presence in the actual community development
And actual action.
and the policy making and all of that, right? It's not very existent. It's just full speed ahead in the clinical approach to how we're going to work with psychedelics. And I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it, because On one hand, I trust the medicines to help put people back in touch with the essence of who they are. And on the other hand, I see the indigenous communities and perspective continually being viewed in the same diminished light that they always have been.
When you were working with these shamans and healers, was that part of where the education came from around psychedelics and their tie to the native communities?
Well, I think in the really indigenous communities, they don't do things like we do. They don't teach so much. If you come to do the ceremonies, you do the ceremonies.
Yeah.
And you learn
Right.
by doing.
From the medicine.
From the medicine, you learn. You see the challenges that they live in, and you understand that. And when you get involved to see how you can help them, you start to see a bigger way of life, and you see this incredible grace and wisdom that the elders carry. These indigenous communities are very complex and in many ways divided amongst themselves. They're not all in agreement necessarily that the old ways should be carried forward.
Well, that sounds familiar for other communities right now.
Yes, there's division there too. So they live in a complex world of all of that, and things like COVID and all of that, they played parts in creating division in different ways too, because certain people believe this and certain people believe that. There's not any easy answers. And when I'm talking about indigenous communities, while there's similarities, I really have to clarify that it's about the indigenous communities that I've been a part of.
Yeah. I'd love to go back to that individual journey too, to talk about, now we know after doing the life purpose reading, right, that like hand reading and all this is like such a core tenet of what you're offering right now. Mm-hmm. Who is the healer that actually introduced you to that art?
Yeah, his name is Ravyn. Ravyn mentioned his name. Mm-hmm. He very quickly became one of my teachers.
Oh, this is who you went to the yurt to experience and you were helping, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, amazing.
Yes, I've apprenticed with Itzhak for a number of years now, 8+ years, I think. And he's the one that first invited me to come to Ecuador.
Yeah.
To meet the indigenous, the Yachoks there, they call the shamans in the highlands. And all of the traditions have their own name for what we say shaman.
Yeah.
You know, in their own language. But yeah, he's the one that first took me there, and he's the first one that read my hands.
Beautiful. Is that something you were seeking out originally, or is that just part of what he offered? When
the reading of the hands, no.
Yeah.
No, I had no idea. But we were in a conversation, and I asked him a question, and he suggested I show him my hands. So I did.
Yeah.
And he very quickly, I mean, as you can see in the readings, like we did a 15 or 20-minute talk or something. But if I'm looking for that core dynamic without the talking and explaining to you what I'm looking at, I can find that in a very brief time.
Yeah.
And he did that for me within a matter of 20 seconds. He spoke to a core challenge that I was experiencing at the time. And I just knew I had to learn that, because it's that type of way that the shamans carry with them this medicine to very quickly and efficiently deliver a message that impacts you, just like Walking Thunder had done. And what Itzhak told me was, he says, the problem with you is that your life's all about public speaking, but you're an introvert.
Stop.
Right? And it's not the whole story, but it's a key element in the story, just like we pointed out a few different key elements that are there for you. And so that was my entry into learning to read hands.
This is making me feel better that I came into your reading being like, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Or even when you said put your hands up, I was like, okay.
Yeah. And I went on to learn with other people too. Some of his original teachers early in his work, who Richard Unger that I spoke of was one of them.
Wow.
But Itzhak also learned from some of the shamans in Ecuador who use a very different type of reading the hands to, in the way of the Yachacs, and this is the Yachacs in the Otavalo area of Ecuador. And not all the shamans there use hand reading, but there's at least a couple that do. And they use it as part of that diagnostic to understand what's happening with the client. Because the clients come with all kinds of stories.
Yeah.
They come with the story, but what we need to do is see through the story to the truth of what's really happening, or relate to the story in a way that reveals the solution, that what they need to do in order to correct that issue in their life. So the hands are one of the ways that you can use to see into those core aspects of their life to provide that.
Is that what drew you to the art itself? Obviously, your own experience sounded so powerful of like, okay, well, that was 20 seconds, and now I feel incredibly seen.
Yes.
But what else drew you into wanting to learn how to do it for other people?
Well, at that point when I met Itzhak, I was really in the process of developing the gifts and the toolkit, so to speak, of how I'm going to work.
Yeah.
Right? Which is a very organic process. It's not like you can just get the book and flip it open and choose.
Yep.
It's through your own experience of what impacts you the most. That's what becomes the medicine that you carry. This is a very indigenous way. We've been talking a lot about this idea of, the transformation of the challenges. We talked about that in the reading that we did. And I'm talking about it constantly when I'm reading hands, because the gifts and the traumas are intertwined. We can't separate the two. The light and the dark is intertwined. We can't separate one from the both. The Japanese or the Chinese symbol of the yin and the yang, each has the seed of one in the other, of itself in the other. It's like this, right? In the way that we're talking about in our own life with these challenges and the gifts that we carry. Many of the gifts are born directly out of traumas and challenges. You grow up in an unsafe environment, and you, in a sense, need to develop the gift of intuition so that you can know when it's safe to be around and when it's not safe to be around.
Yeah.
But then if that's your only relationship with your gift of intuition, you're constantly, is it safe to be here? Is it not safe to be there? That's no way to live. You have to go beyond the victimized, traumatized part of yourself to learn to use the gift to help people and to empower yourself in a deeper way, which is the transformation into the real sense of power or bigger part of the gift.
And I think hearing your story, that's exactly what you had to do too.
It's exactly what I had to do.
So it makes sense why you would be drawn into an art that just mirrors your experience.
Exactly. As I was spending all this time in the different communities that I would be in, and here in North America and Africa and Ecuador, I was hearing these consistent themes of your purpose and your power and this ideas of the transformation. I mean, those are consistent everywhere I've been. And it just settled in. And it's like, isn't it interesting that reflecting on all of this of how we're guided in life, I never once set out to help people with life purpose.
Right.
It's just how it formed in my life. But isn't it interesting that I do that now, when the question that I had for spirit when I was going out of this life and into the next was, if there's a purpose in this life, show me now.
Yes.
Right? All of these challenges that we have in life, if we're willing to confront them, lead us exactly where we need to be. It's not rocket science, this life purpose stuff. It's just that culturally, and I think many ways, most places in the world, we've grown up steeped in these cultural belief systems that take our power away. They take away that innate relationship with life that puts us in touch with our power and our purpose. And that's been done so that the people in power can stay that way. And we just see it here in this country, maybe more than anywhere, especially right now.
Yeah, with the power dynamics.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think I was asking after the reading for you to ask about Ravyn's hands, because I know you had a much more in-depth reading than what we did today. And I love talking about power and leadership and how the palms can really help you see these things are meant to be used for good.
Right.
And we've had a lot of examples, you said, of power not being used well.
Right.
Yeah.
But one thing I'd love to ask you, as someone who's also gotten the reading done, because I loved hearing you being like, just show me your hands, because that's how I felt today.
Right.
How did you feel Michael read your hands for the first time?
So what's beautiful is that Michael was there and in co-creation with IIHA the first time that I had a hand analysis completed, and was able to validate. And you may or may not remember, you shared in the moment that we carried a similar trait. And that was so interesting. When I had the opportunity to sit down with him intentionally one-on-one, it was at a second expo event where he was a vendor at the tail end. And it was, how do I say this? It was like the gut check that I needed, because the thing that you had asked me that I continue to sit with was, and with such fierce intensity, what are you creating? You're supposed to be creating. What are you doing?
What the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, I feel like it always comes back to the same question, which is like, what the fuck are you doing?
It really is. And
Or what the fuck are you going to do?
exactly.
Oh, that's a good follow-up.
Exactly. And I think that he did a beautiful job of answering the question that I came with, which was, I'm trying to do this thing. So what do you think? And his question back to me was, well, what are you creating? And it really did put the ownership back on me to take the information and guidance that you so beautifully delivered. And it was up to me, and it was evident that it was up to me of what to do with that information. And I think that is such a beautiful skill that you have, and that this modality offers, is that I'm going to sit with you in your truth, and I'm going to offer you your truth, but then it's going to be up to you what you do with that.
Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah.
And I think it's important to recognize that we are all on our own journey. And while I wish that everybody could come into touch with that deeper sense of power and the beauty in life, that people have to make that decision for themselves. And just like I went through the deep transformation, right? I mean, a bit of an extreme thing that I went through, to literally be on the edge of death, to be called back into this life, to go through those incredible challenges that I went through, and to figure it out in that way. I don't, of course, recommend that. I think, and it's a big part of my work, is putting people in touch with what they need to know so that they can correct course before they get there. Because that's what's happening, you know. Or if life is like this, we have the ability to kind of maintain the status quo in life, or we can move upward, or we can get caught up in life that takes us in a downward spiral.
Yeah.
And realistically, it's all happening in a whole bunch of different ways at the same time. It's kind of chaos, right? Because things can be going in a positive way, and there's challenges, right? And we just have to figure out how to navigate that in our own life. But if we can come into a relationship with our own life where we are even 51% on the positive side, we're moving in a positive direction. And I mean, honestly, most of my clients are healers or artists or poets, or in some way a part of this, I guess you could say, revolution of consciousness that's happening, and being called into that in their own way. Because it's those people who are asking that question, what is my purpose? And all of that. And it's also the sensitive ones, and the poets and the artists and the healers that are experiencing more of the challenges in life in these deeper psychological ways and spiritual ways, because those are the challenges that we need to come into doing what we do. And there's really no cultural support for that. as far as the doctors are concerned, if they can't see the problem, then there's no problem.
Right.
And the psychological help or the spiritual help is very, very limited.
Yeah.
It leads you into alternative ways of figuring out those problems. So naturally, I find myself working with those kind of people. Don't have easy answers for what they're experiencing.
When we have those expos, when we set up booths and we're doing these smaller versions of our readings and offerings, do you find that same clientele finds your booth? Or do you find there's a differences in who finds you in those moments?
Oh, definitely. I mean, some days I could almost just record the first session and replay it.
Yeah.
Because so many of the people are experiencing the same things. And of course, they have different details to all of their stories. But what I'm looking at in the hands are quite similar even to what I was looking at with your hands in that reading. That whole thing with lack of nurturance, lack of connection, lack of emotional connection, it's a cultural epidemic. There's really nobody, even the best parents, doing a fantastic job by our current cultural standings, are probably not going to satisfy the sensitivity of the soul.
Lack of embodiment.
We live so far apart from
Yes.
being in touch with our simple human nature. Yeah. To be human is to be in touch with the heart. Yeah. And we live in a world, and especially our culture, where we are in the mind.
I was about to say an unintended benefit of me finding community and being more intentional with the people I surrounded by. I was just talking to a client about this morning. This is funny. Suffering, at least in my experience, thrives in isolation.
Yes.
Overthinking thrives in isolation. The second I get with my community, second I'm around other healers or friends or whoever it is that has that intentionality, all of that loses its power.
Yeah.
Because the second I share that narrative out loud with them, and I'm in a space where I can be held, they're going, "What are you talking about?" Like what the fuck are you doing? What the fuck are you thinking?
Right.
But I didn't realize when I was seeking out community, like just how bad the lack of nourishment was for myself, but especially the people around me, until we started sharing those inner stories that weren't true. Like you said, when people come to the shamans and the healers and they come to us and they have this whole range of stories and we have to cut all the way through it to get to the challenges. I think that was something that I felt in your hand reading, where it's like we skipped the journey. We went straight to the root and we went to where I could go and what can be inspiring about that. And I thought, man, that was like 5 years of therapy in one hand.
Honestly.
Absolutely. I think that every therapist and doctor and anybody helping anybody should have some way like this to connect to their clients. It's one of the main issues that I've seen in our Western medical system. And the way that I explain that is that the doctor's always there with a clipboard right between his heart and yours. And the data, the mind, the information, and all of that. And it does very little for the patient. What they need is the connection. They need the heart of somebody really deeply caring. And it's not like there's no doctors doing that, but they're very few and far between.
Yeah. And
that's, in my eyes, the main issue with our modern healthcare system. And I mean, I could mention a few other things too, but it's really that, because with all of the technology that exists, there is absolutely no reason that people are experiencing all of the health issues that they're experiencing today.
Right.
There's no reason.
Right.
It's that the whole system and the cultural lens is pointed in the wrong way. That's the problem.
How full circle for you, though,
Yes.
to have the experience you did and have the Western system.
Yeah.
And to be able to create this life and this platform to be able to talk about it.
I wouldn't be alive if it weren't for the Western medical system. But I could also say that if it weren't for the Western medical system, I may not have ended up in the same problem.
Same position.
That they saved me from.
Yes.
Because that's all go back to the story of overuse of antibiotics and different things that compromise the immune system at an early point in life, along with trauma and other issues.
Yeah. But
it's this whole cultural system that's just completely out of balance. We're out of balance. We're out of touch with, you could say, the heart and the mind. We're certainly out of balance with nature.
Do you find the folks that are coming to you for life purpose readings are feeling the symptoms of that and their own lack of clarity?
Absolutely. Yeah.
How so?
I mean, every story that I hear is, in one hand, exactly the same, because there's the trauma that separates them from that connection with themselves that they came here to live. It's an interesting thing, life purpose, because, I mean, we see it all here in the hands in this very simple way. To look at it from a little bit different lens, it's like, it's our deepest sensitivity. It's what we came here to utilize in life. And that's the gift that we have, is the sensitivity. Even for those people that are born to be mathematicians and engineers and live in the whole logical side, they have a very sensitive mind. And that's their gift. If they grew up in an environment where their mind could not be honored, they'd be in the same position as the healers do. It's just that we live as the healers are now in life. It's just that we live in a cultural context that is supporting them. It doesn't support the emotionally sensitive ones or the psychically sensitive ones.
Right.
And so when you think of it like that, sensitivity that we have, that we came into life with, when we experience trauma, no matter what it is, it's going to impact that most sensitive part of us. That's why you can have two siblings grow up together, and they have a very different story about what that was like.
Right.
They had the same mother, the same father, and if dad was the alcoholic, as in the case was with my family, he was the same dad, but each one of those siblings going to have a very different relationship with him. Not because he treated them differently, because he's the same person.
Yeah.
They do have different relationships, but it's more about that deeper sensitivity that they have in relation to the life purpose that causes that differentiation in the relationship.
When people are starting out on this journey, the people that find you with their life purpose, what is your hope when they walk away from the table?
That they'll take it and use it. That's the hope, and it's no matter what the work is, right? Whether it's a 15-minute consultation or we spend a couple of hours doing healing work. It's not easy to integrate these things into life. It's an ongoing process. And I think it's like, on one hand, it's a journey and not a destination. And so many people have this relationship with life where they're just going to be gentle and they're going to take these little steps that are not too far out of the comfort zone in their path.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that's bad, because we all have to do things in our own way. But I think, why not just yank the rug out from under all of it?
Yeah.
And just get it over with and do it.
Yeah. I don't know any other way.
Life,
I tried.
it's just a challenge to take it seriously how we feel.
Yeah.
If we can come to the realization that the most important thing in life is how we feel in our work, in every aspect of life, and take that seriously enough that we start doing something about it, then it all starts happening.
Yeah.
And that's what people put off, because how we feel in relationships means finding your voice, creating boundaries, redefining the nature of that relationship. And if you've been in that for 20 years, or you've been in a series of relationships where you're terrified to do that, then it seems like the most difficult thing in the world to do. But it's what we have to do. And if you just start doing that, you realize it. You realize that very quickly.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a very beautiful game of dancing with life, dancing with that challenge and the gift, right? Just like I was told, my life is about public speaking, but I'm an introvert. And it was so true. And I was also given some very pointed advice of how exactly to address that. And I pass that on to many of my clients too, because it's relative. But, you know, as I started doing that work and integrating it, and I would go into these situations where I find myself public speaking, and I would be terrified of that. 3 weeks before, I would start writing down everything, and I would go through it 1,000 times in my head, and I would drive myself nuts.
Yeah.
And then I would get there to do it, and I'd start like reading the script, and then I'm like, oh, this is too scripted. I've got to just speak from my heart. But then that wasn't right either, because I would overthink it, or I'd overtalk it, or I wouldn't stay on time or whatever. But as I just started engaging with that and refining it, I've come to learn to love that edge of being out of the comfort zone. It means that there's something really good about to happen, because that's what calls the best out of us. Yeah. But if we've developed a relationship with life where we don't take that risk, then we don't ever experience it, and we just play small.
I think that leads me to something I think a lot of people think about right before readings or after readings or in this search for clarity. What advice do you have to people that are learning how to surrender and be uncomfortable for the first time?
How to surrender and be uncomfortable for the first time.
You're like, how long do you have?
Well, I'll say this. It's much harder thinking about than it is doing it. Because thinking about it, you're just caught in all the fear of what's going to happen and how terrible that might be, and all of the control, the feeling of control that you're going to lose. And I mean, truthfully, so many people, they go for decades living that loop of thinking it in the mind. But if you just do it, if you just surrender and feel that and allow those emotions to just exist without judging, without trying to make it go away, without trying to fix it, then you realize the beauty of it. And in many cases, if you just stick with that process long enough, because this is what I was speaking to a while ago, we are hardwired to transform energy. That's what we are here to do. It's what humans are born to do, is transform energy. What we don't do is feel what we need to feel. As soon as we surrender to the feeling and the process of inquiry, of just observing and watching, and with curiosity, we learn what we need to learn from that feeling. We realize the ridiculousness of the mind and what we're doing to ourselves. Healing happens and the transformation happens. And in a very short time, you can let go of decades or maybe lifetimes of fears and issues just simply by surrendering to that.
That's beautiful.
Thank you for sharing that.
It's the same thing that we have the opportunity in just about every moment in life to, especially if we're in some challenging situation, do we surrender in that and trust? Or are we going to resist that and we're going to fight and try to be somebody that we're pretending to be?
Right.
You know? And or in these different processes, emotional processes that we can do. Meditation's a great example, right? You just sit and be present with what is without changing a thing. And it starts to happen in you. Now, plant medicines, on one hand, very different, right? I mean, like ayahuasca and the strong ones, right? They, a whole other thing. But at the same time, it's the exact same thing. Because if you resist that medicine, you're going to get an amplified challenge of the same challenge you've been going through for all of your life, or whenever the problem started. But if you surrender to that feeling and you trust that medicine and you trust that feeling and you just be with it and allow it, allow is the best word, then it very quickly becomes the most beautiful, powerful teaching that you could possibly imagine.
Lack of resistance.
It's not the feeling, it's the resistance to it that's the problem.
Yeah.
I agree. Beautifully said.
If I had 60 seconds to say something without knowing a thing about a person, what would I say? I would say, become very curious about your deepest fears and dive in. Look at them, face them, feel them. And if that's all you do, you will find your way into the right way in your life. That's it. But then, inevitably, with the process of that, there's a lot of questions that come up.
Yeah.
And we may not relate to the emotions we feel as fear, but I think that's part of it, right? Is just simplifying this incredible dynamic emotional range into two simple things. Is this love or is this fear? And if you can recognize that even lack of self-confidence or frustration or whatever the name is that we're giving to emotion, if it feels good, it's fear.
Yeah.
If it feels good, it's on the spectrum of love. And having that simple relationship to it and then taking that to your emotion, if you just, it's the same thing I already said, right? Confront the challenges and it reveals your gifts and your power.
I'm grateful that you facilitate experiences and share wisdom that allows people to explore that in a safe way, because I think exploring it on our own is powerful, but I'm glad people like you exist and have the teaching that you do.
Me too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really mean it, so thank you.
And we'll be sure to let listeners know how they can find you via your website, and also about so many other beautiful modalities that you have in your toolkit that you do on behalf of those in the community that come and seek you out. Thank you so much. I can't wait to have you back to talk about more of your beautiful gifts in the future.
I will look forward to it too.
Yeah.
Thank you both for holding the space and allowing this to happen, encouraging it to happen. And if anybody interested can go to the website. There's always new opportunities coming up and lots of information there.
Yay! I can't wait to send people to you.
Yeah.
I'm just going to have them go blind. I'm just going to give them an address.
That's what I did with Marcy. Yeah.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ah.